Hi and welcome to another episode of EU5. I am Aegis Cores and I'm bringing you a new campaign in the Ireland region. I'll be taking over a three province minor nation called Mayo, which is on the west coast of Ireland. It's part of the Lordship of the Pale. So there's new mechanics with Ireland in the latest version of Europa Universalis. Everyone is a vassal under the Pale, who's a fiefdom under the Kingdom of England. So it's a bit of a challenging start. I've had a couple of different runs. There's a lot of RNG that's involved in this. You have to declare war pretty quickly because the Pale will start to take some of the clay. Some of the bigger provinces like Munster and Thurman, who have more provinces than myself, will start to annex some of the vassals as well. Unfortunately, the only casus bellis you have are either no CB, right, where you have to take a pretty big stab hit, or you have to wait 5 years for the Parliament. So in this run, we're going to be taking initially a stab hit for the no CB war, but I'm going to wait until a couple of the smaller nations get a block of alliances, figuring if I'm going to take the stab hit, I might as well chain it and turn a 1 or 2 province minor into potentially 6 provinces at the start. So the goal is to kind of blob as soon as possible, because England is inevitably going to attack. So you just have to get prepared there. Blob as soon as you possibly can. Get as close to Scotland, because they are willing to ally you as long as you're not, taking provinces of interest. In this run, I do get an alliance with Scotland, and then ultimately get an alliance with France, and then you hope that England is going to attack you when they're still recovering from some of the various wars that they're going to be having with France at the start of the campaign. So you're going to use that to your advantage, use the Scotland wars of independence at the start as well to your advantage, as you see they're in a war immediately. And then I'm looking to skip ahead a couple months as I kind of found a war that made sense, where I was able to kind of get a 3 for the price of 1. So let's get into it. Declare war here. I'll quickly kind of walk through some of this, where we'll quickly show the results of the war as you try to seize down lands and piece them out as soon as possible, right? It's a situation where it's speed is of the essence. I have higher levies than all of them, but you can't wait for them to consolidate, so you have to kind of move quickly. A lot of times you are able to get your levies out before they do, the AI. So you just kind of have to move quickly, seize it down, separate piece out. You might be able to raise additional levies after you separate piece them, but they're not too hard, right? These provinces, they don't take the same estates that I took, where I was able to increase levies with the commoners and the clans. So it's not a difficult war. You just have to kind of move quickly and figure out what the next chain would be. So I made that piece out, and then from here you're going to kind of pause, because it doesn't make sense to do 2 no CB wars back to back. There's a lot of antagonism that would happen. So I'll wait for the Parliament that comes, and that's a free CB that happens every 5 years. So that also will allow more nations to get an alliance block. Maybe there'll be some more consolidation, with the hopes that I can find what the next war can be for my advantage. So while I was looking for the next war, I did want to kind of consolidate my land, make sure I had connections, mainly because I had nobles that were rapidly rising, and I didn't want to have it too spread out, making sure I had access to all my lands. So for the Parliament Act, I took a war here, two province with Conic, my neighbor, in my immediate vicinity. In addition, they were most likely going to be the one that joins a coalition if I were to declare war, so I did not want that to happen. If you get called on, if you get declared a coalition with somebody that's a vassal of the Pale, they'll just immediately kick you out of the Lordship of Ireland, which makes the run a lot more difficult, because now you have every nation that you want to declare on within the Lordship will bring in England, and I'm certainly not strong enough to go against England without a successful alliance block. So this was a simple war. Quickly sieged them both down. I don't even think they got troops raised, but easy enough. And I'll race ahead quickly here just because I'm just waiting to peace out. I see, if you look on the right, you'll see that the rebels are quickly spawning, and if I piece them out and then lower my troops, I'm going to lose. So I piece them out right as the rebels increase their progress to 100%, knowing that within 1 month tick they are going to declare on me. But because I've left my rebels raised, I'll have more troops than you normally will in a civil war. So here's first civil war. Really, it's the same as any other war. You just got to siege everything down quickly. But it was easy enough with the volume of troops that I had because I left my levies raised in preparation for it. Following that war with the rebels, I was able to quickly put them down. It wasn't too difficult, and by the time I got out of that, I was close enough to the next parliament, so I figured I would just kind of wait for my next war. I've already taken a little bit of land. You're starting to see potential coalition forming, so something I have to kind of be mindful of, but I did see an advantage here with a number of nations, so just kind of playing around with it, trying to see who I can co-belligerate in to get as many nations as possible. Basically, I'll get most of Northwest Ireland after this war with a number of the vassals as I quickly kind of go through the war. It's not hard, right? I have the advantage of the troops. They have more troops if they spawn at the same time, but my direct neighbor was actually at war with another vassal, so they got one of the provinces that I actually was interested in, so they kind of blocked me from taking the war goal. So I was just kind of racing to make sure I seized down one of their lands before they did, so that if they were to piece them out, it's not like an EU4 where you're still at war with the other nations, though the war just kind of no longer exists. So it would have been just kind of a waste of a parliament, have to wait another 5 years, or no CB. But I was able to get most of the land. I was able to get most of the land in this war. Iva is sieging down the goal, so I'm not able to get that one, which is close enough to my nation, which is unfortunate because the closer the nation is to your capital, the more control you'll have after you integrate it. So they take that, but I am able to take Clay around the region of Ireland, right, and start to border on new enemies or future enemies. Some of the countries in the north are a little bit bigger, so having more levy size as I start to separate piece out some of these armies. You know, it started out with 100. Now, as you can see in that stack, it's about 400. The Pale has over 2,000, so still need to kind of grow. I still couldn't do a 1v1 versus them. Not to mention, England can send through 25,000 troops, which will just completely wipe me out. So there is a lot of RNG that happens in that war once we kind of get closer to them declaring. But this war is now done. You kind of take a little bit of a break again, just because there is rising antagonism. So I'm just kind of being mindful of not declaring a no CB immediately. IVA is the next viable target. They do have a number of vassals because they've been a little bit aggressive at the beginning of the campaign. So they've proven to do a little bit of the consolidation for me, which is definitely lucky. As I'm looking to kind of grow, and they can kind of chain together pretty quickly, where I can continue to take more clay in a single war. So right now I'm just kind of looking and trying to evaluate all my opportunities before I decide to declare again. So we skip ahead to the next Parliament CB, which is IVA, as I mentioned before. So I just kind of waited until that timer kind of ran, just so that I can kind of get the wars that I wanted, and they made the most logical sense based on the number of vassals that they had, but proved to be a pretty easy war because their troops are scattered everywhere, so I was able to kind of siege them down and get them out of the war pretty quick. So again, pretty simple war against IVA and their vassals. Just had to kind of quickly get to each of their lands and siege them down before they raise their levies, before they consolidate their levies, but not too difficult, right? I think I outman them, especially if I siege down some of the vassals before they're even able to raise any of their troops, and starting to get a better foothold. And then immediately following that war, same trick I had before, where I just had my levies and waited to peace out until the Civil War was ready to spawn, so that I had as many troops as I possibly can while going through the second Civil War with the nobles. Right, they're always going to be kind of unhappy. I was trying to revoke some of their undesirable cores, so you're constantly in debt and instability in this game, especially in the run at the beginning. So you have to kind of weigh that, because you only can get the Parliament and no CB wars. You do go through a ton of civil wars, especially if you're trying to increase your levies and you giving out some privileges to the non-noble clans. And you have to kind of be mindful of how much power you're giving out, otherwise you'll have no crown power, and certainly something to be mindful of. So the next target I have is to focus on some of the small central Ireland vassals of the Pale, just to get them out from under them. They're small enough, they were easy enough. I wasn't yet ready to take on some of the big guys up north. I think they were outnumbering me at the time. So just looking to kind of snipe away, find an easy war with the parliamental CB that I had coming up. And again, this was pretty simple war to kind of siege them down. Same thing as some of the others, right? Just kind of race to get to it. Really is the name of the game, is just speed, right? Getting your troops out first, taking it slow, and ultimately sieging them down before they can siege you down. And a lot of times their troops don't even have enough manpower to siege down one province, so that just comes to your advantage, and you don't even need to fight them before you can piece them out. Like, they can still have levies raised, and they don't turn into rebels like you would see in EU4. If you kill a nation, you still have to fight that stack. So it is kind of the advantage. If you siege down all the provinces, you can kind of take it without even fighting a war, So we skip ahead a bit. We're now a little over 20 years since the start of the campaign, 23 to be exact. As you can see, I now got an ally with Scotland, which is great. They do have a ton of levies, which will help discourage people from joining a coalition, as well as fighting some of these smaller wars, right? They're just not going to be any match for the strength that I can have, and then what levies that Scotland can bring. And they have about 20,000 troops that they can kind of bring across the border. So even if I lose a battle, they really are not going to be much of a match. And now I have the most important thing is just kind of an alliance block for when England in the Pale inevitably attacks, which is getting closer, right? Because I'm becoming a lot more powerful, and they're losing power. They don't have as many vassals under them, so they certainly are seeing me, and I'm growing my antagonism. So it's probably going to be the last war before they attack me, but easy cleanup, easy able to get all the land I want from them. And now I have all of the north, with the exception of the lands directly owned by the Pale in England. So one of the difficult things is that it's not easy to kind of grow your economy at the start, especially, right? Like, you can't really afford to do anything. The only source of money you have, as you can kind of see, England does declare war on me here. Luckily, I was able to secure that alliance with Scotland, but the income that you get really is just from the peace deals themselves. You don't really get any kind of economy from the land that you have until much later in the campaign, where you can kind of start to build things up. So you have to kind of be agile. You don't have a lot less troops than all of your neighbors when you go into war. So you're hoping that Scotland and then eventually France are viable. A lot of times France doesn't even leave their island when they're an ally, which is frustrating when you're going to war with England and trying to take over Wales for the achievement. But it is a difficult war. The Pale does have a lot more troops. The best way I saw about playing was never really going head to head with them. They just are going to outman me, maybe sniping off some of their smaller vassals. And I was able to separate piece the Pale's vassals, not the English vassals on Ireland. So there's a combination of both. But if you do siege them down, and you don't have to completely siege down their forts, sometimes you could just have them sitting on them and siege down the rest of their land, and they're more than willing to give up all of the land except for their capital fort, which is what I kind of did. I knew I was in a race against time because the Pale was sieging down my capital, and I didn't have enough time to siege down everything else that they had. So they are certainly a tricky and complicated war. Just, you're kind of always kind of running. You're kind of playing keep away from them, trying to take all the province capitals that siege down all of the land and get away before they come and attack you, right? They kind of are playing whack-a-mole, and you're just trying to siege things down, snipe some of the smaller stacks while they're looking for you, and then sometimes they just turn their attention to forts, and that allows you to kind of take a lot of the land out from under England. So you kind of do that, entice them to kind of attack you, and then kind of, again, play more of that game of keep away. And I did that for about 3 or 4 years while England is in a huge war with Scotland. Scotland is just as strong as England is at this stage of the game, just because they have consolidated their region with the civil war that they had at the onset. But England is still kind of suffering from the 100 Years' War. They are just kind of recovering from some of the tough wars with France. So using that to your advantage to take some of the land from the Pale. I took some of the Pale's direct vassals in the final peace deal, which is actually not something I would recommend if I were to do it again. If you just take all of the Pale's land, then the vassals will become yours, similar to EU4. If you take all of the Pale, then you become their overlord. So that would be the ideal situation. Although I think that there's still somewhat of a hitch on what you need to do to become the King of Ireland, because you need to be high kingmanship. So that is something that, even at later stages of the game, I'm still trying to kind of figure out. Moving the capital out of there. Had some issues with the personal union on a European nation, that I think was a part of the reason. But again, it's not a difficult war here by any stretch, as long as you're not caught by their numbers. As you can see, they have 2,000 to my 700. So in a 1v1, I'm not going to be able to do that. But again, if they are preoccupied elsewhere in the land, they're not as much of an adversary. So, this war, took about 3 or so years. Does take a lot of RNG, to be honest, as you want to make sure that they're not coming after you; they're going after other stacks, and as you can see, I'm kind of with the goal to kind of snipe away some of the land that's happening with some of the vassals in the land, right? And then as I kind of siege those stacks, I'm able to then take the clay from the rest of them. So we'll skip ahead a little bit faster, and you can kind of see the final outcome with the peace deal. So it's kind of a continuous game of cat and mouse, right? You're trying to siege down some of the vassal provinces before they come after you. You're constantly looking at Scotland to see what they're doing. They're not always the smartest army. Right here, they're actually doing a better job where they just stay in their land and just repel the British from when they come to their forts. Whereas in the next wars, they are a little bit more bullish and start to send their troops down, and lose war score for me because they're getting completely wiped by the overwhelming numbers that the British have. Even when I have my troops there, it's like, let's just all stay together. Combined, we have more forces than them in the next war, but they kind of send a lot of their troops off to die. But it's kind of frustrating. But in this one, we are kind of outnumbered, and that's probably why they are taking more of a conservative approach and staying in their land versus aggressively trying to get into England. The other frustrating part is that the 100-Year Wars in peacetime, and with England losing a lot of troops to the Scottish, the hope was that they would eventually declare in the 100 Years' War, but that just, my luck did not happen there. But in ensuing runs, I'm sure that there's opportunity to align this first British War with the 100 Years' War, especially if you're on more of the attack. And they would be more preoccupied with the much stronger neighbor to the south. But again, sieging down everything, you start to see the ticking war score because they have not taken my capital. So it's kind of a race against the clock. It is kind of increasing the siege progress there. So I'm trying to take as much land as I possibly can, and get as much war score as I can, so that I can, at the very least, take some of their bigger provinces to weaken them, because in the next war, going up against another 2,000 stack is might not have as much luck a second time. So if I can take Dublin, which is by far the biggest county in this region, it would take away a big portion of their power base in the region. But yeah, now I'm just kind of looking at the different peace deals. Again, you can kind of take individual vassal land. Even if you don't completely siege them down, I take all but one and just kind of separate piece them out and get more troops out, more of an advantage on our side from winning the war perspective. You can see that my fort's still kind of sieging, and again, I'm just trying to kind of time what type of land they can give me. Can I get war reparations, which kind of help fuel some of the initial growth that needs to happen in my country as I recover from this war. So just trying to siege down as much as I can before they ultimately are going to take the clay. And the ensuing results will be towards the end of this video. We skip ahead a little bit. I think I had problems with my recording, or I wasn't recording properly. So after my peace deal, I took some of the land with the PAL. I went to war with them, and I was able to secure an alliance with France, and then got pulled into the 100 Years' War. Eventually white peaced, to get out of that, just because you can't take any land in the 100 Years' War. But then in the 84, I was able to declare on them again and get more land in the region, and start to secure more of Ireland. And I started to create some vassals in Dublin and Desmond down in the south, just because I don't have any control, and they're quite populated as regions. Hindsight, I probably should have just tried to move my capital to Dublin as soon as possible, but I had to kind of integrate it and also assimilate the culture, because it actually was a lot of Anglo-Irish and British from a culture perspective, and I don't have the cultural capacity to integrate those cultures. So again, it's so 2 victories from a war perspective against England, have enough of the clay, and was able to kind of secure a foothold in the region. So it's just kind of timing it. Now I have France and Scotland as allies, so I'm no longer at risk of England declaring on me. I have the advantage that they'd have to kind of come towards me too, and right now, I'm not trying to invade the British Isles as of yet. So it's really just kind of securing the right peace deal that I want, trying to kind of block off Pale from the sea as best I can, right? But this was a lot easier war. Scotland actually sent some of their troops here, and I was able to wipe the Pale off pretty quickly, and then they kind of ferried their troops back over. and then it ended up being a war, and they were starting to take a lot of casualties from the British. I knew it was about time to, secure the peace deal that made the most sense for my land. But as you can see, I've started to secure a good portion of the island itself, with a number of my vassals that I'll eventually have to integrate myself. But certainly have enough of the land, and you can kind of see the blue is mine, and then the red is still land owned by the British Crown and the Pale. So one more war, and all of that land will be mine. And then the last war of this first video, where I'm able to kind of consolidate all of the Irish Isles, which was the ultimate goal, right? Can I ultimately throw back the British from the Isle, and have Ireland completely take the entire island from the Pale and ultimately the British. Again, now with my vassal swarm and my own levies, I'm definitely overpowered for the Pale, especially taking Dublin away from them. And England is still recovering, right? They're still in the midst of the 100-Year War. I have France as an ally, and Scotland, right? And they're helping me to invade. I'm ready to send troops over to Scotland. I mentioned earlier, they're not always the smartest troops. They sometimes send their troops off to get slaughtered, but with the British getting seized down by all of their lands in France, and I have no intention to give the French those lands, mainly because they'll still stay angry with the British as long as the 100-Year War is going on. So I've been able to kind of abuse those mechanics, time my war so that France doesn't call the next phase of the 100 Years War, just because they have to siege their capital in a lot of ways, and they never really send their troops over. But as you can see, the outcome, I have now consolidated all of the British Isles. I have a couple of vassals. After the war, after I took all of the Pale, I then have all of the Pale's lands. So again, I took all of the lands. I'm trying to figure out how to turn into Ireland, but I need to be a high kingship. So was working on annexing all of the lands to get all of the properties. But goal of the campaign, I've turned Connick from, or I turned at the time Mayo from a 3-province minor to owning all of Ireland, and with the biggest hegemon in France as an ally, along with Scotland. So certainly have a power block, with the intention to take the Welsh land next. I already have a foothold in Wales with 1 province there, and with the goal to, as well as the Man, as you can see in the water there. So have taken a little bit of clay, and now I'm working with the war reparations that the British have been paying to help kind of build my economy, build towns, build temples. Have annexed my Dublin vassals, so moving the capital over to there once I can kind of convert all of those resources. But that will take it for the first phase of this video. On the next phase, we'll go more into the wars with the British Isles. But this certainly covered a lot, covered the span of the first 60 years or so, with wars to consolidate the Irish miners, to consolidate the lands that the British had owned in Ireland, and now I am the self-proclaimed King of Ireland, even though I have not been able to click that button and turned into the Emerald Isle. Thanks for watching, and I look forward to the next video on part 2 of the Irish campaign.